You know, sometimes the most telling part of a story isn't really what happened, but maybe what didn't happen.
That's a good point.
Take these recent efforts, to get Ukraine and Russia talking in Turkey. What's really grabbed the headlines is, well, who wasn't there?
Exactly. Two very key figures missing. And that raises a lot of questions, obviously.
It really does.
Yeah, we've been digging into a Fox News article from May 15th, 2025. It lays out these disrupted talks pretty clearly, and it gives us the viewpoints of Secretary of State Rubio and former President Trump on why things seem so stuck.
Okay, right. Let's try and unpack this diplomatic puzzle then. So our mission for this deep dive is basically to get a handle on this impasse, why things aren't moving, and what specifically Rubio and Trump are saying about future talks.
Sounds good.
So the article says talks were scheduled for Thursday in Turkey, but then they got pushed to Friday. And the main reason for that bump...
No Putin, no Trump.
Right. Just poof, not there. Meanwhile, you've got President Zelensky, delegations from Ukraine, from Russia. They're all actually in Turkey.
Yeah, basically waiting around. It definitely sends a weird signal, doesn't it, about how serious the engagement is, maybe.
Or at least how coordinated it is at the top. If your teams are there, but the bosses aren't, it suggests maybe some communication breakdown beforehand.
Could be. Or just different expectations about who needed to be there for day one. It certainly points to some underlying challenges.
Okay, now here's where it gets really interesting, I think. Secretary Rubio weighed in.
He did.
And his take was pretty definitive. He basically said a breakthrough is only possible, only if Trump and Putin meet directly, face to face.
That's a strong statement. He seems convinced nothing productive happens until that specific engagement occurs.
What do you think is behind that? Is it just about cutting through the noise, or maybe a belief in their personal chemistry or lack thereof?
It could be a few things, right? Maybe Rubio believes the core issues really hinge on those two specific personalities and their understanding. Perhaps he feels past interactions show that's the only way, or maybe he just sees this huge disconnect that only they can bridge.
It definitely highlights how much weight is being put on individual leaders here.
Massively so. Which is interesting because if you remember the background here...
Ah, right. The article mentions this.
Putin himself initially suggested direct talks between Ukraine and Russia. And Zelensky agreed, saying, yeah, the leaders needed to be involved.
Okay, so there was agreement, at least in principle, that high-level talks were needed.
Exactly,
Okay.
which makes Putin's absence
Even more puzzling.
well, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a direct contradiction to that initial idea, isn't it?
Yeah.
It suggests maybe a change in thinking, or perhaps, like Trump suggests later, maybe a genuine misunderstanding.
And speaking of Trump, the article clarifies his potential role, too. He'd apparently said he might go to Turkey.
If there was progress on Thursday.
Right. But he wasn't expected to be like a day-one negotiator. He was finishing up a Middle East trip.
Precisely. So his presence was more conditional, a potential later step, not a prerequisite for starting things off.
Which makes his explanation for Putin's absence kind of fascinating.
Okay, so first, the Kremlin just confirms Putin isn't coming. No big surprise given the uncertainty.
Right.
But then Trump, talking from Air Force One, offers his interpretation.
And what was that again?
He suggested Putin didn't show because of a, quote, scheduling miscommunication. The idea being Putin thought Trump would be there too.
A scheduling miscommunication involving heads of state for peace talks.
That's the explanation offered, yeah. And Trump apparently doubled down, saying, no real progress is possible until he and Putin speak directly anyway.
So his explanation kind of loops back to his main point. It all hinges on them talking.
It reinforces that narrative, absolutely.
Yeah.
Whether it fully explains Putin's absence, well, that's harder to say from just this report. It frames it as Putin wanting that top-level meeting simultaneously.
But here's the kicker, right? The article explicitly states there are no known plans for them to talk.
Correct. Zero plans on the books for a Trump-Putin conversation as of this report.
So you have key figures saying their meeting is essential.
But no meeting is actually planned.
What does that even mean for the process? It feels like a complete stalemate based on that logic.
It creates a huge bottleneck, doesn't it? If everyone's waiting for a meeting that isn't scheduled, where do you go from there? It suggests maybe an impasse, or maybe reluctance, or perhaps it's just not feasible right now.
Meanwhile, Secretary Rubio did say the U.S. is, willing to keep trying for peace.
He did, but with a significant put.
The caveat, yeah. He said they don't want unproductive meetings.
Which sounds like, okay, we'll keep working, but we're not just going to show up for talks that go nowhere. More results-oriented, maybe.
Pragmatic, perhaps? signaling that maybe just having delegations meet isn't enough if the key decision makers aren't engaged or willing?
It could suggest a shift towards demanding more concrete signs of progress before committing time and resources.
Okay, and finally, what about Zelensky's reaction? The article mentions he was quite critical.
Oh, very pointed. He called Putin's absence and the lack of a high-level Russian team personal disrespect.
Towards whom?
Towards President Erdogan of Turkey, the host, and interestingly, towards Trump as well.
Wow, okay. That's strong language. What does that signal from Ukraine's side?
It really highlights their frustration, their disappointment. Framing it as disrespect is a way to maybe apply some diplomatic pressure. It questions Russia's seriousness, not just to Ukraine, but to the host nation and to someone like Trump, who some see as potentially influential here. It suggests deep concern about Russia's good faith.
So if we pull all these threads together, the Turkey talks basically stalled before they started, largely because Putin and Trump weren't there.
Yeah.
Rubio thinks only a Trump-Putin meeting can fix it. Trump suggests Putin stayed away because he wasn't there.
Due to a supposed mix-up.
And Zelensky sees Putin's absence as a deliberate slight. It's messy.
It is. It's a snapshot of a really complex situation. This Fox News report really shows us the web of expectations, maybe misinterpretations, perceived insults, all swirling around these peace efforts.
And the incredible focus on just a couple of individuals.
Definitely highlights the very personalized nature of diplomacy in this specific conflict at this specific moment.
So, wrapping this up for you, the listener, we see talks stalled, key players absent, and differing explanations flying around. Rubio points to one specific meeting as the only solution, while Zelensky sees a lack of respect.
It really underscores the uncertainty hanging over any potential peace process right now.
Which leads to the final thought, I guess. If so much hinges on this potential Trump-Putin meeting, what happens if it does occur? Or maybe more importantly, what if it doesn't? Are we maybe putting too much emphasis on just these two leaders and perhaps missing other crucial factors or other actors who might ultimately shape what happens next?
That's the big question, isn't it? Something definitely to keep thinking about as this situation unfolds.